Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to put together a quick Angular 2 application using the new Angular-CLI, which is a bit of a change from some of my earlier videos on Angular 2 where we use the quick start. Alright, now if you're on Windows, Mac, or Linux, it doesn't matter. Just make sure you have Node.js and NPM installed. If you don't, just go to nodejs.org, go ahead and download and install that, and you should be all set. Alright, I'm using Windows, so I'm going to open up a command line as administrator. Alright, and then you just want to go wherever you want to set up your project. I'm going to go into a folder called projects. Alright, and first thing we want to do is install the CLI. Now, we want to make sure we install it globally with the G flag here. So let's say npm install G Angular-CLI, and that should get it all set up. Okay, so once that's all set, we can generate an application using ng new and then whatever we want to call it. We'll just call this A2 todos. Alright, and that might take a minute or two to generate. So I'm going to pause this and I'll be back in a second. Alright, so now that that's done, we can go ahead and cd into that folder. And let's go ahead and run ng serve. And that should start up our application. Alright, so we're going to go to localhost port 4200. And there we go. There's our application. Open up the console, you can see there's no errors, everything is good, and we're ready to create our application. So what I'm going to do is open up our project folder in my editor, which is Visual Studio Code, which is a really nice free editor for Angular 2 because it has really nice TypeScript highlighting, and TypeScript is what Angular 2 uses by default. So let's open up that folder. And the file structure is a little different than the quick start. Everything that we're going to be doing is in the source folder. This is where the app folder is, where all of our components and services and all that good stuff will go. Alright, we also have a config folder for our environment and testing. We have the dist folder, which was just created when I ran the app. That's the compiled application. That you don't want to touch that. You want to work in the source folder, and then it gets compiled to the dist folder. The E2E folder is for end-to-end testing, which I'm not really going to get into. Public, that's where you want to put your style sheets or your external scripts, jQuery, things like that. And then we have our typings down here. And Angular-CLI has these two config folders as well. We have the Angular-CLI JSON file, and then we have the build configuration file, which we don't really need to explore right now. Alright, so let's take a look in the app folder. Okay, we have app component.ts, and if you know Angular 2 or you've watched some of my other Angular 2 videos, this should look pretty familiar. Okay, we have our component decorator, which allows us to attach metadata to our component. We have the selector, which is app root. We have a template URL, which is the HTML file that's created for us as well when we created our application. We also even have a style sheet that is dedicated to this particular component, which is the app component. Alright, and then down here in the class, we're just setting a property title to the text app works. If we look in the HTML file, we just have an H1, and then we have the title, which of course is app works, and that's what we see over here. Alright, we also have spec files for testing, but I'm not really going to get into that. I just want to kind of cover the basics. So what I want to do now is create a new component for our to-dos. So what I'll do is go into our command line. I'm going to Control-C to stop this, and then we're going to generate a new component. Okay, we can do that with ng g component, and then whatever we want to call it, I'm going to call it todos. We'll run that, and you can see that it created all these files for us. Alright, when you name the component, you don't need to do .component because it adds that for you. Alright, so let's go ahead and run this again with ngserve. And now if we look over here, you can see in our app folder we now have a to-dos folder. And that creates all these files for us. Okay, if we look at our main TS file, it looks just like the root app component. And then in the HTML file, it just says to-dos works. Now we don't see it over here because we haven't included it yet in our root component. So let's do that. If we go to appcomponent.ts, we'll go up to the top here and we'll say import, and it's called to-dos component, and that's going to be from /to-dos, to-dos/to-dos.component. Alright, now we also have to add that as a provider, as a directive. So we're going to put a comma there and say directives, and then just add to-dos component. Alright, so we'll save that, and then in the to-dos component, notice the selector is app to-dos. So what we'll do is go to our app component HTML file, go under the H1 here, and we'll say app to-dos, save that, and now you can see we have our component displaying here. Now let's go back into our to-dos component TS file, and what I'm going to do for now is just add the to-dos right here in the component. So right above the constructor, let's say to-dos, and then in the ng on init, that's where we can put all of our initialization code. So I'm just going to put it in here by saying this to-dos, and we're going to set that to an array of objects. Okay, each to-do is going to have some text. We'll say pick up kids at school. Let's see. This one will be meeting with boss. And dinner with wife. Okay, so we have a couple to-dos. Now let's go ahead and save that, and then if we go to our HTML file, we're going to go, we'll get rid of this, and let's create a heading, say to-do list, and put a UL, and then in our LI we're going to have our ng4, so we want star ng4, and we're going to set that to let to do of to-dos. Okay, and then in here we should just be able to say to-do dot text. We'll save that, and now you can see that it's fetching the to-dos from our component and outputting them onto the screen. Alright, so let's say we want to have an input so that we can add to this list. So I'm just going to go right above here and we'll put in another heading. We'll say add to do, and let's put a form. Okay, and then we're going to have an input with the type of text, and we're going to add an ng model here, which gives us two-way data binding, and we're going to set that to text. And then we need some kind of event to happen, so in the form tag here I'm going to add an event handler for submit event, set that to add to do, save it, and then back in the component we're going to go underneath the ng on init and we're going to add to do. Now since we added the ng model equals text onto that input, we can access it by saying this dot text. Okay, let's actually just console.log. And we're getting this red line because we have to add it up here as well. Alright, so let's save it. And then whatever I add in here, enter, we get test. Alright, so what we want to do is just add it to this array of to-dos. And that's pretty easy. We just say this dot to-dos dot push, and then pass in this. Actually, want to pass in an object with text and this dot text. Save that. Okay, and then we'll just type in test to do, enter, and you can see it got added. Okay, we can add as many as we'd like. Now when I reload, they're going to go away because they're not being persisted to a database or anything like that. Now before we address that, let's go ahead and make it so that we can remove these to-dos. Alright, so back in the HTML, right after the text here, I'm going to put a link. Actually, we don't want that. Let's just put a button. And let's put some parentheses, and we'll say delete to do. I'm sorry, I don't want to do that. I want to put click and then equals delete to do, and let's pass in to do dot text. Now with a production application, you'd probably have an ID or some kind of unique value, but since we don't have that, we're just going to pass in the actual text. Alright, the point of this application isn't to build something that we would use in production. It's just to kind of give you an idea of how to create an app using Angular-CLI and how to just do some basic stuff. Alright, so let's go ahead and save that. And whoops, we forgot to add text to the button. Let's just put an X. Okay, now when we click it, it's going to look for a function called delete to do, which we don't have yet, so we're going to go back into the component and say delete to do. Okay, let's put here to do text, and then what we'll do is do a for loop. Okay, we're going to say for var I is equal to 0, not 1, I. And then we're going to say as long as I is less than this dot to-dos dot length, and then we want to say I plus plus because we want to increment by 1. Alright, and then what we need to do is match the text to the current iteration's text. So we'll say if this dot to-dos I dot text is equal to to-do dot text, which is what's passed in, then we want to splice it out of the array. So this dot to-dos dot splice, and we're going to pass in I1. Alright, let's go ahead and save that. And now if I click one of these, you can see that it deletes them. Alright, if I reload, they're going to be there again, because again, the data, it's not getting persisted to a database. Alright. Now, you have a lot of different options as far as databases. You could use something like Firebase, you could use MongoDB or some other kind of NoSQL database, but what I'm going to do is we're going to build a service and we're just going to use localStorage. Okay, something really simple. It'll kind of mimic an outside API. Alright, so let's go ahead and generate a service, which we can do with Angular-CLI. So we're going to just Control-C to stop this. And then what we're going to do is say ngg service to do. Okay, so that generated a todo.service.ts file. Let's go ahead and run ngserve again. Alright, and then we'll go and open up our service file, which is right here. Okay, and you can see it already adds the injectable decorator for us. It creates the class. Now this error here we shouldn't have to worry about. It says experimental support for decorators is a feature that is subject to change. Set the experimental decorators option to remove this warning. Okay, I'm not going to worry about that yet unless it gives us some issues. Alright, now what I want to do is just go in the constructor and say console.log to do service initialized. Okay, now it's not going to run right off the bat. We have to go and import it. So we're going to go into our root app component ts, and let's go and import to do service from, and let's see, that's going to be /to-do.service. Okay, now we have to include this as a provider, so right here we're going to say providers to do service. Okay, we'll save that. Now we also want to include it in our to-do component, so we're going to import it here as well. Okay, so we have to do // to go outside of the to-dos folder, and then to-do.service. Alright, and since we added it as a provider in the root app component, we shouldn't have to here. Alright, now we're going to have to inject it as a dependency. We're going to do that in our constructor parameters right here. So we'll say private underscore to-do service. Set that to to-do service. Okay, we'll save that. And now down here in the console you can see to-do service initialized. So we know that that's connected. Now we got to figure out how we're going to store these. Okay, we're going to use local storage. Now with HTML5 local storage you cannot store arrays or objects. It has to be a string. So what we're going to have to do is convert our arrays and objects into strings and then insert it into local storage, and every time we fetch it we'll have to convert it back into JSON. Alright, so let's get rid of this whole thing. Alright, and then we're going to go to our service, and let's go and create a function. We'll call it get to dos. Alright, so what we'll do is create a variable called to dos, and let's set that to local storage dot get item. Okay, that's how we can get a stored item, and it's going to be to dos. Alright, now like I said, it's going to be a string when it's stored in there, so we need to convert it to JSON, so we can just wrap it in json.parse. Alright, and then we can simply return that. Alright, and then back in our component, in the ng on init, we'll say this.todos is equal to this dot underscore to do service dot get to dos. Okay, and then let's just do, for now, oh no, that's fine, we'll just leave that. Okay, we'll save it. Now obviously we don't have anything stored, so we're not going to get anything here. Now the way I want this to work is if there's no to-dos, if we don't add any and there's nothing there, I want to create a file that's going to initialize a couple sample to-dos like the ones we just had. So I'm not going to put that functionality in the service. I'm going to put that in a separate file. Alright, so in the app folder I'm going to create a new file. I'm just going to call it init-todos.ts. Okay, and we're going to export class init. Okay, then we'll have a function called load. And this is where we're going to check to see if there's anything in local storage. So let's do if local storage dot get item todos is equal to null, or local storage dot todos local storage dot get item todos is equal to undefined. Okay, so if it's null or undefined, that obviously means that there's none there. And I'm actually going to just make this a little smaller and this wider. Okay, so there's nothing in local storage. So let's first do a console log just to let the user know. We'll say no todos found, creating. Okay, and then we're going to create a variable called todos and set that to an array. Actually, I'm just going to paste this in. Same stuff we had before. Okay, so creates a variable with the todos. So now we need to set that value in local storage. So local storage dot set item. Now remember, it can't store JSON. It has to be a string. So what we'll do is, let's say, set todos to JSON dot stringify, and then pass in todos. Alright, so it'll turn it into a string and then save it, and then we're just going to return. Okay, now if this is false, so if there are todos, let's put an else right here, and then we're just going to console log found todos. Alright, and that's it. That's our initialization file. So let's save it, and then we're going to go back into our service file, and we need to import that. So we'll say import init from, and then we're going to go, let's see, we need to go outside. No, it's in this same file, so just init todos. Okay, now in order to use that, we're going to take the to-do service and we're going to say extends init. Okay, and that's going to give us an error right here, because in order to call the init class constructor, which we don't have one, but it's still giving us an error, all we have to do is type in super. Okay, and that's going to fix that. Alright, and then finally we just want to call the load function. So we'll say this.load. So let's go ahead and save that and let that reload. And now you can see that those to-dos have been generated. Down here you can see no to-dos found, creating. So now that we're fetching them from local storage, the next thing we want to do is we want to be able to add them to local storage. Alright, so back in the component, where are we? Todos component TS, we already have the add to do, and if we go ahead and add it, it is going to be added here, but it's not in local storage. If I reload, it's not there anymore. So what we'll do is we're going to go right under the push we did here, and we're going to say this dot underscore to do service dot add to do, and we want to pass in, let's see, we want to pass in this dot actually, you know what I'm going to do is up here I'm going to say var new to do equals, and then the object, which is going to be that, and then instead of doing this, we're just going to push in new to do. Okay, and then down here we can just pass in new to do. Now we're getting an error here because that's not created yet. So let's save this, and then we'll go and create that in our service. Okay, that's going to take in new to do. So first thing we're going to want to do here is, just like we did here, we're going to just fetch the to-dos from local storage. I'm going to copy that, paste that in, and then we'll just add new to do. Oops. So we can say to-dos dot push, and then we're going to pass in the new to do. Alright, and then we need to set it again. So we'll say local storage dot set item. Okay, the item we're setting is to-dos. And remember, it has to be a string, so we're going to say JSON dot stringify and then pass in to-dos. Alright, so let's save that. Alright, and then let's put in a new to-do here. Let's say go food shopping and enter. And now if I reload, you can see that it's there. It's still there. That means it's in local storage. Now what we'll want to do is the delete. I can still delete it here, but if I reload, it's not going anywhere. We need to actually delete it from local storage. So we'll go back to our component, to-dos component, and go into our delete to-do function here. And we'll go under the for loop, say this dot underscore to-do service dot delete to-do, and then we're going to pass in to-do text. Okay. Now, whoop, that should be uppercase T. And then what I'll do is I'm going to copy this for loop because we're going to basically the same idea in the service. So let's copy that and make sure that's saved, and then we'll go back into the service and let's create delete to do. Okay, that's going to take in to do text, and let me just paste that in for now, that for loop I copied. But before that, we're going to have to fetch the to-dos from local storage. So I'll copy that, paste that in, and instead of this dot to-dos, it's going to just be to-dos because we're now pertaining to that. Okay, so we'll just get rid of this. Okay, and then we just need to reset, just like we did up here. Let's save that, paste that in, save, and now if I delete go food shopping and reload, it stays deleted. Alright. Now I realize that we don't have a way to update these. Okay, so you might not want to have to delete and then re-add it if you want to update one. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Alright, now what I'm going to do is add a new property here, and we're going to call it app state. Alright, and let's set a default. We'll say app state equals default. And then what I want to do is make it so that when we click one of these, it's going to change into the edit state. Alright, so let's go to our HTML, and we're going to wrap around this to-do.text. Let's put a span, and we're going to say click. Okay, click equals let's say edit to do. Okay, so click equals edit to do, and I want to pass in the actual to do. Okay, let's save that. Let's go back into the component, say edit to do. It's going to take in to do, and let's change the state. We'll say this dot app state is now going to equal edit. Okay, and let's console.log this dot app state. Alright, I'm just doing this off the top of my head. I didn't prepare this, so forgive me if I get a few errors. Closing. Oh, I didn't do the closing button. I'm sorry, the closing span. Alright, so if we click that, it changes it to edit. Alright, now when it's changed, I want to take that to do and I want to input it into this this text box, which pertains to the text property. So what I can do is say this this dot text. We're going to set it to todo dot text. Alright, let's see what that does. Okay, if I click that, there we go, dinner with wife, click that. So whatever one I click is going to show up in that input box. Now there's a few ways you could do this, but I think what I'll do is have a different form for an update. So, and we can do that depending on the state. So we'll say div star ng if, and let's say app state, if app state is equal to edit, no, we'll say is equal to default, then we want this. And then let's copy that, and we'll say if it's equal to edit, then our submit, we're going to want this to be update to do. And actually, you know what we can do is include the heading. So I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to put that in here, add to do, and then in the edit, let's say edit to do. Alright, so let's try that. Alright, so I click that and you can see we get edit to do. So we know that this is being loaded. Now, when we click on one of these and we see this text, we want to save this text, okay, the old to do, before we change it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set another property up here called old text. And then we'll go down here, and when we go into edit to do, we're going to set that. So we'll say this dot old text is going to equal to do dot text. Alright, and then we're going to have our update to do, which is fired off when we submit it. And that's going to take in, actually that's not going to take in anything. What we want to do, let's first just console.log, and then this dot text should be the new value. Alright, so we click on this, dinner with wife, let's change it to dinner with dad, enter, and now you can see down here it's changed. So what we'll do is loop through them just like we did here with the delete. Paste that in. Okay, we're gonna loop through, and then instead of the to do text right here, we're gonna change it to this dot old text. Okay, we're gonna see if the current iteration, the current text, is equal to the text when we clicked on it, the old text. If it is, then we're gonna say this dot to do's I dot text is going to be this dot text, which is the new text. Alright, so let's save that. If I click on dinner with wife, change it to dad, enter, and now you can see that that's changed to dad. Now if I reload, it's going to still be wife because we haven't we haven't persisted it to local storage through our service. So that's what we're going to do now. So under the for loop, we're going to say this dot underscore to do service dot update to do. Okay, and then we're going to pass in both the old text, this dot old text, and also this dot text, which is the new text. Save that, and then let's go into our service. Okay, I'm just gonna copy what we have in delete to do, paste that in, change it to update to do. Okay, it's going to get passed in two things. It's going to get old text, and we'll say new text. Okay, we're going to fetch the to-dos just like we did in all the other functions, and then we're going to loop through, and we're going to say if to-dos I.text is equal to old text, then we're going to set to-dos I.text. We're going to set that to the new text. Okay, and then we're going to just set it again down here. So let's save that. Okay, dinner with wife. Change it to dad. Enter. Changes there. Let's reload. And it stays. Alright, so we now have full create, read, update, and delete operations on our to-dos. Now real quick, just to make it look a little better, we can add Bootstrap. So let's just use the CDN. Actually, you know what we can use is boot swatch. Basically gives you some custom themes for your Bootstrap. Okay, so we have all these different themes. Let's grab let's see, we'll just grab this superhero. If I click download, it takes us to a custom Bootstrap CSS file. I'm just going to grab the link here, copy that, and then we'll go into index.html, and let's just put that up here. We'll say link rel style sheet, paste that in, save it. Okay, and just to shape things up a little bit, let's go to Get Bootstrap. And I'm going to go to Getting Started, Examples, and the starter template right here. We're going to do a Control U and just grab the nav. Copy that, and I'm going to put this in the app.component.html file. We can actually get rid of this h1 as well. Okay, we'll paste that in. Let's change the project name to A2 to-dos. I'm going to get rid of the LIs. We don't want any links. And let's put a div here. Give it a class of container. Okay, and then we'll just do div class row. Okay, we'll save that. Let's take a look. Alright, I actually want to remove this class right here, navbar fixed top. We'll get rid of that. Alright, and let's see. Let's do, for the input, I want that to go all the way across. So in our to-dos HTML file, where we have our input, we're just going to add class equals form control. And we're going to do the same for the other input here, the edit. Save that. Alright, and then for the to-do list, let's see, instead of, actually we'll keep the span, but for the li, let's add a class here of well. Alright. Actually, no, you know what we'll do? We're not going to do well. Let's do the UL. We'll give a class of list group. And then for the LI, we'll give that a class of list group item. Alright, and then for these buttons here, let's give the button a class of BTN and then BTN danger. And then I think we can do BTN SM for small, or is it small? Maybe it's just SM. Actually, I think we can do BTN tiny. Let's try that. Oh, maybe not. Let's see, components. Actually, you know what? That's fine. Let's just leave it. Alright, make sure it still works. We get rid of dad, reload. Okay, if we want to edit one, we'll change meeting with boss to meeting with client, enter. If we reload, and it sticks. So that's going to be it for this video and this application. Feel free to improve on it, add to it, whatever you'd like to do. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and leave a like, subscribe if you can, and thanks for watching.